We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Okay, Johnny D. John has an Epson Home Cinema 1080 projector with a 106-inch Carrata Classic white screen in a dedicated light-controlled theater. It is 8 years old now, and he's starting to itch for an upgrade. I know that feeling. He doesn't want to spend more than $2,000, though, and if he's going to upgrade, it needs to be something that will be really obvious to his wife and not just an incremental improvement. He's considering the Sony VPL-HW45. It's brighter, quieter, has better black levels and contrast, and does 3D. But are there other projectors he should consider instead, or something worth waiting a bit longer for?
Yeah, so honestly, Johnny, we're in a tricky time. We're in a tricky time with projectors because we're in the midst of this transition to 4K, high dynamic range, right? And in the news, we mentioned that Epson 5040. Now, there's that slight little quibble about it not being able to handle HDR with a 60 frames per second frame rate, but your movies are not in 60 frames per second. They're in 24 or 30, primarily 24. It will do HDR with that. So the Home Cinema 5040 from Epson is $3,000 right now. Obviously, that's exceeding your budget. But the difference in its capabilities from your 1080 to the 5040 versus from the 1080 to the VPL HW45 or the previous model, the Epson 5030, which is sort of a contemporary of that Sony HW45, like the difference is considerably greater because now you have something that's compatible with a 4K video signal and can display high dynamic range and can go to the DCI color gamut, that wider color gamut. It has a filter that allows it to do that. So it's a considerable leap in features and performance. The price right now exceeds, but that price always drops. It's brand new right now. And it will be $2,500 this time next year. I have almost no doubt of that whatsoever because historically that's been the way those Epson projectors have almost always come out at $3,000 or $3,500. And within a year's time, they drop by $500. That just happens like clockwork. So my genuine answer would be if you were to wait 1 year, I am convinced it will be $2,500. That gives you a year to save up $500 from where you are now. I think maybe that could work out, and the difference will be large. It's going to be a massive difference. Whereas I'm not saying the VPL HW45 isn't a great projector. It's a really, really nice 1080p projector at a really nice price. If you got it, I don't think you'd be super disappointed, but because of the moment that we're in this transition, to me, it's like a half measure, right? If you were to keep the HW45 for 5 to 8 years, you might feel that you've been a little bit left behind by all this 4K HDR stuff. Whereas if you wait the 1 year, you'll be right on the cutting edge, right? So that's kind of my argument. It depends on
what's causing this itch. If there's anything wrong with his current 1080 projector, or so I don't know the specs of what he's looking at.
Maybe his bulb is on the verge of death and he's like, I don't want to buy another bulb and the bulb's going to last 3 to 5 years, but I'm only going to keep this projector for 6 to 12 months. There's all kinds of circumstances where it would totally make sense. But
I'll tell you, in a light controlled theater, better black levels alone are noticeable by the average person.
Absolutely.
Especially if that person, like your wife's been watching this projector all this time. It would be better, but with
you'd be getting a brand new bulb, which is going to make it look,
all that's better, right?
All nice and bright and that.
But if everything's working right on your current projector, it's kind of like I have my 50-inch plasma, and I'm dying to get a bigger 60, 65-inch screen. But the 65-inch LG OLED is $3,500, and I need it to be more like $2,500.
They're down to $2,800 right now, dude.
Oh, that's so close. It's coming soon.
The B6s are down to $2,800 right now in the 65-inch screen size. I know,
I need it to get under 25. If it would get under 25.
They're taunting you, Lee. They're taunting you. But,
it's going to, but no, I'm going to hold firm. 25 at least. It's got to go under that. So it's coming real soon. You see what happened. Last time I looked, it was 35. And that was just weeks ago.
That's right.
And you're telling me already it's at 28. So, man, if your current projector's working right, if it's a decent projector, if it's working right, hang in there. If it's got some serious problem or you're about to need a bulb, maybe go ahead with that Sony or another.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Sony would be a great choice. If you got to buy a projector right now and you cannot spend more than $2,000, I don't think you can do better than that choice.
Right.
So, hopefully that gives you the information you need to decide for your particular situation there, Johnny.
All right. And he's got one more question. What does a variable iris do in a projector?
Yeah, so there's a couple different kinds, and I believe he's talking about a dynamically variable iris, but let's just go over both because you can have a fixed variable iris or a dynamic variable iris. So
Changes the light level.
Yeah, so a fixed variable iris you just set. That is an iris that you can close or open to allow less or more light through, respectively. Right. Therefore, if you have a really bright projector but a fairly small screen, maybe it's actually too bright. So you close down the fixed iris, and it just stays there. It closes down, it allows less light to pass through, that dims the image, of course, and that would be a fixed variable iris. But I believe he's talking about a dynamic variable iris. That is one of the differences between, say, the Epson 5030, which is the older model, the one that's 1080p only and SDR only, versus that Sony HW45. The Epson 5030 has a dynamic variable iris, the Sony HW45 does not. So what the Epson does is, have you ever seen like a dynamic contrast setting on a monitor or on a television, where based on whatever image is being shown on screen, it will dynamically adjust the contrast of the image. It'll boost the white or cut the white level. It'll boost or cut the black level. Well, a dynamically variable iris does a similar thing. It analyzes the image that's on screen. It says this is an image where almost everything is dark. It's a dark scene in Supernatural on TV, or it's, one of the later Harry Potter movies where almost everything is in the shadows. It's like the average picture level, the average amount of light on screen is really, really low. So I'm going to close down the iris because I don't need to produce anything bright. And by closing down the iris, that deepens your black levels even further. Right.
So it's basically compensating for a not perfect black level. By sending out less light in the dark scenes.
Yeah, what it's really doing is it's increasing your maximum on-off contrast, right? If you put a really dark scene, it can close down the iris. It's mechanized. It's so it does it on its own. So it can close down the iris in a really dark scene, open up the iris in a really bright scene. So the difference between the darkest dark and the brightest bright, full on off is increased that way. But let's say you have a scene that has some really dark parts on the image and some really bright parts at the exact same time. Well, now that dynamic iris has to either split the difference or favor the dark over the bright or favor the bright over the dark. And usually there's, that sort of changes with the picture mode you select. Right. That might change the behavior of the iris as well. You almost always have the option of just turning the iris off entirely as well.
Yeah, my first concern is how fast does it open and close? Because if the picture brightness, just goes wide open real fast, you're going to see it ramp up over a split second, depending on how fast it is.
And that is the complaint people have of dynamic irises. They've gotten way faster. So, but people will say if you get just the right type of transition, you can see the iris gradually open up slower than the scene transitioned. That can happen, or close down. So that is a possibility. Also, it can make a little tiny bit of noise. Some people can hear the noise of the iris opening and closing.
So if it's mounted right over your head, you might hear a little zzz sound as it does.
So, there's pluses and minuses to it, but overall, it's usually beneficial. Because despite whatever occasional glitches you might see where it doesn't close or open quite fast enough or whatever, overall it can tend to give you deeper black levels in those really shadowy dark scenes because it can dynamically allow less light through. So usually it's a benefit, but not always. So that's what it does, though.
Right on. Now we understand. Question answered.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.